isn't this great in another sense that we can all link one another as a community in solidarity, even though that we are far away from one another? We can continue to discuss the importance of a perspective, a vision that flows out of a great pain, but nonetheless can potentially revitalize the extraordinary gift of Yazidi culture, the extraordinary gift of nations that can provide stability, and the extraordinary gift of how the Yazidi community, particularly in America, continues to integrate here, wave the American flag, and yet at the same time celebrate this ancient culture and faith tradition that has really captured the imagination of the world. And this is my primary point to you all today, that as so many of the Yazidi community has been terribly traumatized because of external events that were no fault of your own, sweeping upon you, creating conditions of horror and death, and yet the resiliency, the reserve, the ability to not only flee, regroup, regenerate, leave, for some of you who had to flee, and rebuild, particularly here in America, to me is an extraordinary story. And it really, in the deepest way, expresses what we are as a people here in America, that we believe in chances, we believe in opportunity, we believe in a fundamental premise called human dignity. So when the genocide first began to happen, it seared in my memory a group of young men, all of whom had been military translators and of course gotten special immigrant visa to the United States, came to see me and were on the verge of tears and understandably on the verge of anger, saying, "Congressman, act, do something, my mother, my sister, they're trapped. So this began the long journey. I'd actually knew the Yazidi community prior to this, again, had worked on a piece of legislation earlier in my congressional career that allowed for special immigrant visas for those who had risked their lives next to our troops in primarily translating, some of whom died. And so I'm proud of the fact that the Yazidi community, through an odd convergence of things, actually settled for the most part in Lincoln, Nebraska, my constituency and my home. And so we enjoyed a good and quiet relationship for a long time, but then the genocide came. So upon the appeal of these young men, we went into action in Congress and did some things with the Obama administration to try to salvage in the moment what could be salvaged, given the horror of what ISIS's twisted ideology imposed upon you and other religious minority communities. With that said, several years ago, at the behest of the Vice President, I did visit northern Iraq, Nineveh and Sinjar, and to attempt to look at and review what our policies were doing in terms of the economic aid. And it was clear to me that the economic aid has potential, but it depends upon security. And with so many Yazidis, hundreds of thousands, still trapped in what I call refugee camps, work camps, and pressures for migration increasing, it becomes all the more important that the security measures in northern Iraq be undertaken with a robust consideration. This is why I pressed the State Department in the recent bilateral meeting with the Iraqi government to continue to raise the issue of the plight of religious minorities as to how the communities that are there can be fully integrated into perhaps regularized security forces, and that there be special considerations for minority status, given the pressures that there are to leave, but the desire for many to remain and to reclaim their land and to rebuild. This also would have to involve the negotiations with the Kurdish government. So the point of all this is to please be aware of three things. One is, I consider myself a friend of the Yazidi communities. I'm proud to represent you in the United States Congress. I'm proud that the largest Yazidi community here is here in America, in Lincoln, Nebraska. Second, there is still much to do from the trauma of the war. Third is your organization and your efforts are critical to maintaining what I call a consciousness, an awareness of the ongoing work that's left to do, not only to help the communities here in America who are rebuilding and preserving extraordinary tradition, but help the communities back home who do have the chance and possibility to stay and rebuild. And that means integration into government processes, security forces, as well as fairness and economic dealing. So if you can continue to make the case that this is an important part of America's foreign policy consideration, it helps those of us who are in these positions, who understand the subtleties and nuances and still the trauma that remains. One last thought. When I was there with the community in northern Iraq, I met a person who said, you know, you can rebuild buildings, but it's hard to rebuild a person. The trauma suffered by so many in the community, particularly women who were captured by ISIS, some of whom who may still remain captive, again, is a compelling story that the world needs to hear because it keeps alive, again, the ongoing trauma that happened to the community and the need for all of us internationally to continue to raise consciousness about this. Yes, provide support funding, but also assure the community has proper integration into healthy nationalistic Iraq. Thank you very much.